All right. Welcome to the Ask Me Anything from Basecamp with the illustrious Jen from Patagonia. We're very, very happy to have you here. I'm Jenna, one of the co-founders of Basecamp. You probably know who I am if you're here. If not, you can find me on LinkedIn and ask me whatever you need to ask me there, or hop into any of the many kind of networking and community events that we hold. For this event, we're here for Jen to answer your questions. And if you want to come on up and ask one, I'll just ask that you raise your hand via the Zoom function, and I will call people in order. Like I said to the first group here, be brave, raise your hand early. We probably won't get through everyone that wants to chat. And I found that most people wait until kind of halfway through to raise their hand. So I highly recommend that if you want to get some face time, you raise your hand early. And when I call your name, tell us who you are and like a very brief like title and company type of thing, or like what type of job you're working on, so we have some context, and we will go from there. If for whatever reason you can't ask your question, put it in the chat and I will try to ask it for you if we have time. And with that, actually, Jen, introduce yourself very quickly and then we'll get to Brad's question.
Yeah, my name is Ando. I'm calling from not very sunny Ventura, California, here at Patagonia's headquarters. I am on the external PR and communications team. My exact title is executive communications. So what that translates into on a day-to-day, a lot of prep work for our leaders, for public speaking events, their speech writing, briefs, talking points, statement writing. The way I the dumbed down version, not to say that y'all are dumb by any means, it's just me, how I explain it to myself is I just do a lot of writing for the company, whether it's coming from our CEO, our president, our founder, whoever it is, or just a general statement. That is kind of my wheelhouse, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. So glad to answer your questions here.
All right, Brad, start us off.
Okay, thanks. Hey, Jen. Brad Allen. I'm a product marketing manager, and I am was unfortunately part of an 8% reduction in force in February. So I'm trying to
Oh
pivot,
man.
and yeah, it is what it is. But I'm trying to pivot into outdoor products market. Patagonia's been one of my favorite companies for a long because I spend my weekends backpacking, hiking. Anyway, my question is, it might be, and I'm curious about your answer to this. So Patagonia has stayed vocal on environmental issues, even with the U.S. policy kind of shifting. From a PR perspective, and your perspective, and your opinion, how do you decide when to take a public stance versus focusing your influence like behind the scenes or trying to influence in other ways?
Damn. Yeah. Starting off with the good ones. Thank
I'm
you,
sorry,
Brad. No, that's a great question.
I've been dying to know that because your environmental stance is one that I identify very,
Yeah.
very, very, very strongly with. So,
Yeah. It really does come down to, and believe it or not, it's two questions. Mostly it's whether we have credibility in talking about something, whether that's the environment, whether it's talking about family friendly business policies or the like, having credibility and experience. And then number two, the question is whether we can be additive. Those are generally the two biggest questions we ask ourselves as kind of the first litmus test of whether or not we're going to engage in something. So for environmental stuff, for instance, I mean, we've been involved with local groups since the 70s. It started with Yvonne writing a check to Mark Capelli for Friends of the Ventura River, who, he's still got an office just down the way over here. So we will always engage in things environmental, public lands focused, just because we have that history of that. So it gets a little trickier in terms of stuff that we're seeing today. So I don't think I have to explain to all of you what's happening in the world, but in terms of whether we engage in things or not, one of the additional questions we ask is whether or not it's affecting our community, our customers, and most importantly, our employees. So it may seem to some folks that, Patagonia might be like straying from its lane whenever we talk about certain things, but it all comes back to the questions of, can we be additive when we address this thing? Are we credible when we address this? And how is it affecting our employees? And unfortunately, in a lot of cases that we see for like tragedies, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be with what's happening in the world today. If we look at the fires in LA last year, for instance, that was just in our backyard. So we were going to say something about it, where in some cases, if there's a natural disaster, and we might not have a community, it might not be something that we engage on. But since it affects our employees, our customers, and our communities, I mean, we will do things behind the scenes, whether or not we engage with it publicly or not. But when we start getting public about things, a lot of the times it is trying to help elevate some of the messaging for our partners. So AmeriCares is going to be one of the biggest ones, our nonprofit partner that has they've been doing relief for years and years and years, and we've been partnering with them on that. So that might be a reason why we go public with some of that stuff. And back to the LA fires specifically, I mean, that was one of the messages in there where we're working with AmeriCares. Here's what we're doing. We're donating. If you are in a place to be able to help, here's what you can do. And similarly, that is what happened with the fires in South America as well. So it may seem kind of arbitrary to people who kind of run into Patagonia here or there or just on social media. But in reality, we take every single one of those issues seriously and then put it through that sort of 2-question test to start off and start going from there. If it does affect employees, though, specifically, as I'm sure many folks here probably saw our statement on ICE, and we don't have to go into that. I'm here as a person, not as the spokesperson for Patagonia, but I mean, it was that question about how does it affect our communities, and it did. So we could not say something about that. Yeah.
Okay, I'll remind everyone else again, just because some people are new, raise your hand if you want to ask a question. In the meanwhile, while we have people kind of getting their courage up, I'll ask you, Jen, working at Patagonia, what's like an easy way? What would be the easiest way to break in if you don't have outdoor experience? What are some things that, might be helpful on an application?
We're increasingly in a time where having those technical skills actually matters. I think Yvonne wrote about it in Let My People Go Surfing, but we're kind of like past that time when a surfer would walk down the street and be like, "Hey, dude, I need a job. Are you hiring?" And like Patagonia would hire him. But for now, it really is like tightening up the technical skills and making sure you have those relevant skills to be able to perform the job there. I think we talked about this too the last time, Jenna. Like, if we had those two candidates, I'm sure this might be a question here, but if we had two candidates with the identical resume, with the exact same skills, with the exact same experience, to me, if I'm sitting in on that interview, the person I would choose is the one that has the passion for the purpose. I think a lot of people at Patagonia work at Patagonia because they want to work for this company versus like this was the one thing that was open. So it does like it can be hard to say that you can't get by on Stoke alone. But it definitely helps if you're in the position if it's starting to get competitive for sure.
Thank you. Zach.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer, for asking. And Jen, thanks for coming here today. My question might be actually just building on Brad's earlier question. My background is in operations and supply chain management, and then I also spent time as a medical tech on a search and rescue team. I'm currently getting my MBA to go into supply chain and operations management, but very passionate about sustainability. And so my question to you is, with Patagonia's brand being so tightly tied to sustainability and transparency, how do you kind of closely align the comms and PR teams, and how do they work with the supply chain and operations teams when shaping that narrative? And then, how do you balance that narrative to ensure that, the story is compelling, but that the operational realities and constraints of a global supply chain aren't like just thrown to the side and aren't neglected?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it gets to this point that our company philosopher, which is a real position here, it's a lovely man named Vincent Stanley. But whenever we had talked, he was saying that Patagonia shares 95% of our DNA, our daily worries as any other company. So it's like everything that you're saying, tariffs, we still have to deal with tariffs. We have to deal with conflicts, uh, and just everything else that a global company has to deal with. In terms of how we tell the story in a compelling way or a way where we're not trying to gloss over the realities of what we're dealing with. I mean, I think it comes down to being selective about what the stories are to begin with. And what I mean by that is that we don't just say shit to say shit, basically. And I will say, though, the people who work here that I'm extremely fortunate to work with are like the most passionate, most driven people that I have ever met. And so finding the stories and telling those stories isn't usually the toughest thing for us. So to give you an example, which I'm not sure if anybody has heard about this on this call, like good for you, Zach, you may have actually, but ZEMBA, which is the Zero Emissions Maritime Buyers Association, which is like our big thing to get with Amazon and some of these other companies to really cut down on emissions from seafaring transit. That is a story. Again, might not be the one that lands on the homepage just by nature of relevance to the rest of our community. But um, if the story is there, we will tell it to anybody who will listen. And sometimes what actually ends up happening is the biggest thing that Patagonia can do is join groups like that. So where Patagonia might not be screaming from the rooftops that we're part of Zemba and look at the really cool shit that Zemba's doing. A company like Amazon being part of Zemba is pretty huge, or any number of the larger companies being in that's they can tell the story. Zemba can tell that story. So part of it is like being selective about the stories we tell, but also being very real with ourselves when it just isn't our story to tell to begin with. I think it kind of gets to this whole thing where we hear people or other companies, business leaders always say like, well, we're not Patagonia, we can't do this or that. And if we start taking credit for all of that stuff, like every single little thing that happens, then yeah, you kind of just do end up being seen as an anomaly in the business world. But if we can elevate the actual organizations, the groups, all of the people that are working together on this stuff, like that excuse kind of starts eroding, and people can find it a lot more accessible and possible to make those big changes to lighten their footprints. And it just serves this entire idea where like the biggest thing that we can do is kind of scale the stuff that we do, because we're just a small California company with a really big bullhorn a lot of the times, and we're not afraid to use it. But if we do something like zero emissions sea transit, that's really cool. That's expected of Patagonia. Great job, guys, right? But if we could get all the other larger companies to do it, not just apparel, but across industries, all of that, like that to us kind of is success. So another very roundabout way of saying like sometimes success for us isn't telling that story and our part in it. It's just the fact that the thing is happening.
Yeah, makes
Which
sense.
is like, yeah, it's a great model. And it's something that our founder Yvonne is very clear about that's really what success is at Patagonia.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Julia, come on up.
Cool. Thank you, everyone who's asked a question. And thanks, Jim, for being here and Jenna for moderating. I am a comms professional as well. And my question's like kind of a twofold, and I hope a lot of people can relate. So I spent the past 6 years freelancing and consulting. And I don't know if this is in your personal experience. So just from the Patagonia perspective. So my kind of first fold is asking about transitioning from freelancing to full-time as a communications professional, copywriter with like a vast portfolio, but 6 years of self-employment.
Yeah.
And then my second fold is I used to work at the Santa Cruz Patagonia store. It was 10 years ago. It was awesome, but is that relevant to like if I'm applying to Patagonia? I mean, it's 10 years ago. I worked there for 5 months in between full-time roles. I think some of my coworkers had transitioned to HQ, but like, how relevant is that? Is that sort of silly? Yeah, Jenna, thank you.
Yeah. I agree with Jenna there. It is relevant because to me at least, so much of the learning curve about this company is the culture. And if you already have that experience and know it, I mean, like you said, from the people that you know, where it's completely permeable going from retail to HQ, and honestly, sometimes vice versa. And I don't know a lot of companies where that's the case, is the thing. So I 100% agree with Jenna's 10,000% relevance figure there. In terms of getting in a house, I mean, honestly, I went from retail to here. I was at retail at REI was the thing. But I will say, at least from my experience, people knowing the brand is really, really, really important. Um, I think there is a sense where there is the art, the practice of communications and PR, none of which I went to school for. So I feel like not the best thing to ask me about. But um, to be to be in my position for a company that has this history, like I studied and still do, and go back and read the books and talk to the people that have been here, visit the archives, and just try to get the sense of all of the words that have been written before the things that I write, and building on that. And it kind of just it puts things a little bit more into perspective. Like now, I don't know if that's going to be the same for every company, but at least I would say for the outdoor industry specifically too, there are a lot of really interesting, very storied brands out there, with heritage out there. And I do think some of them, this is coming from Ando, the person, the casual observer, not the Patagonia employee. But I do think there are some outdoor companies out there still kind of struggling to find their way and like their identity and what it is in 2026, and that's completely valid. But it just so happens that Patagonia is like we've always had that identity, and so it makes it a little bit easier for us. But I mean, knowing where we came from really helps inform writing, communicating about where we're going for sure. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. And I specifically was asking like for Patagonia, not just
Yeah.
industry at large. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, Anna.
Hi, thank you, Jenna and Jen, so much for putting this together. I am a marketing and communications professional. I'm based in Vermont. I would say I'm adjacent to the outdoor industry, looking to get further in. And I checked out the recorded video that you both did. And Jen, you spoke a bit about introversion and being an introvert, which resonated as a fellow introvert. And I sometimes feel like that is maybe even at odds with wanting to pursue a career in communications. I'm actually right now strongly considering an offer for a role that is um, highly collaborative, involves a lot of FaceTime with a wide variety of folks. And so I was curious if you have any advice for introverts in communications in the outdoor
Yeah.
industry.
That that's a you're getting the double dose of me, so I apologize. But honestly, I find that like my introversion and I think it was Eileen Gu that said like pensiveness, just $1 million word. I love it. But it lends itself to understanding, in my opinion, at least communications a little bit better, where it's like you you already put a premium in interaction, in capturing attention and being able to speak with people just because it's fucking draining. I apologize to anybody. I curse a lot, so I'm gonna try not to. But it helps, honestly, for me. Now, are there days when I spend a lot more time talking than I do writing? And is it draining? Absolutely, it is. But I think the one piece of advice would be number one, to be extremely clear and straightforward with the people you're working with about I was gonna say expectations of them, but that's hardcore. But it kind of is, right? Like what you're working on, having a shared passion and a shared goal really helps. I think in the conversation I had with Jenna before, I mentioned our photo director Heidi saying like if you do something with a shared goal with people, any extra hours don't feel like they're wasted, and you don't feel resentment toward working harder because you know what you're doing doesn't necessarily get wasted, you know. And I feel very strongly about that statement, and I think it's very true, especially as like a person who just gets tired talking to people, you know, for the entire day, which is why I just couldn't last in retail. It's like, um, but yeah, advice would be number one, get very clear on what you're trying to do with the amount of people that you're working with. If it's a ton of people, um, I would say make your presence known in a way where like you have high expectations for yourself, for others, and that having those interactions with you, they just have to lead somewhere, essentially. Um, I don't know what kind of reputation I have around here, but I I'd like to think at least that people know that at least I'm friendly, if not that I just don't talk a lot, you know. So I don't think you necessarily have to cultivate this identity of being mysterious and a jerk or anything like that. But I think people, as long as you're in a place that respects it, at least they'll get it for sure of being introverted in that way. Um, Otherwise, it's just always carry a book with you, and then if you're ever like in a shitty situation, you just leave and start reading somewhere. I do that a lot. It helps.
Nice. Thank you so much. That's helpful to hear. Thank you. Like the book tip.
Hilarious. I'm gonna carry a book as well.
Good.
Um, Shawnee or Cheney, I'm not sure which.
Hi, yeah, it's Chani.
Shawnee. Okay.
Um, Sorry, I'm in a dark room. I didn't realize how dark it was. Um, Thank you so much for doing this and your time. I'm a marketing and program manager, and I didn't study marketing or communications at all. I kind of like it was supposed to be a small part of my job when I first started, and kind of grew into um, a really big part of my job, actually, like I would say almost 50%. So I feel like I've been learning a lot just like on the job. And I probably do more marketing than comms, but I'm just curious in terms of like at some point moving more towards the outdoor industry. I work for a foundation right now. Um, what companies are looking for marketing and comms professionals that don't have that educational background.
Well, I think I might have skipped that. And then it cut out.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. What part did you miss? Do you want me to just repeat myself?
I heard all the way up to what do marketing, outdoor industry people and marketing and comms look for, and then it cut out.
Oh, yeah, yeah, just like what do you look for people that have experience but not educational background? Or like what can I like show on a resume or in the application process um that like speaks to the experience I've had
Yeah.
working in marketing without that educational piece.
Um, I can't really say for sure because I'm just not a recruiter, but my gut is honestly telling me that experience in comms is it's way different than any kind of education that you would get overall. Like, um, we'll just use like the classic press release as an example here, where I'm sure that many of the folks on this call can write a press release three, four different ways within an hour. But I think the important thing is having experience in communicating brand priorities, especially if you have experience in crisis comms. That's a big one. And I think a lot of people also in comms don't necessarily come from that educational background either. I don't want to say like it's not something you have to worry about or consider or anything like that. But it's just there are so many people that I've met, at least in this industry, and that do this job or are adjacent to what we do that, I mean, this was never something that they were planning on doing. And so I do think like if there is a way for you to spell out specifically what your experience is as it relates to communications, it would be super helpful. Now, the other thing that I'll say is that everything that you do um, is a form of communications. So it's kind of getting creative in terms of all of the projects you've worked on, all of the various pieces of a campaign you may have worked on, and thinking about how communications played a role in it, whether it's talking to coworkers, whether it's communicating to the public, to stakeholders, C-suite, whatever it is. Because there are roles in internal comms, external comms. There's jobs like what I do in executive communications, and it's kind of a wide net in terms of what this discipline is. And if you look really hard and like start not necessarily like embellishing anything, I don't want to tell anybody to do that, but like it is everywhere in stuff that you do on a day-to-day basis for sure. But it's just kind of triangulating what it is, like what projects it is, what role you played in those projects, um, dealt with communications and how you handled certain parts with that lens. Does that make sense? Does that help at all?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, there's some questions in the chat, so I'm gonna hop in and Michelle will get to you in just a second. Jin, are there any technical skills off the top, Juwan wants to know that Patagonia is looking for right now? And I will just answer from my perspective because I look at all the job descriptions. They have just done a big AI hire, and I think that is something to be looking into that, the company is hiring folks with expertise in the AI realm. So I would want to know that if I was, wanting to get into the sphere. You mentioned crisis comms. Anything else that, is top of mind right now in the company?
Yeah. Um, I would keep an eye on if I know this is like a PR comms group and that's my position and whether or not y'all are PR comms people, but if you're a product person or a design person, like specifically as it relates to product, I would say keep an eye out for sure. There's there are a lot of things happening within the company, and this isn't like foreshadowing or anything like that. There's not some huge announcement that's going to be coming out. But just in general, we're a product company. We're a product driven company, even though we're known for a lot of different things. And that focus on product is getting tighter and more pronounced for sure. Design, product line management, any of that sort of, I mean, it's not my world. I'm sure there's somebody on this call that knows exactly what I'm talking about. But if you have that experience in products, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, Michelle, we're going to go to you and then Gabriella and then back to Rachel.
Great. Thanks, Jenna. And thanks, Jen, again for joining and answering all of our questions. I'm a brand communications manager at Procter & Gamble, specifically for the brand Native. But I'm always looking for a way back into the outdoor recreation, like outdoor community and like company. I did an internship with Cotopaxi and like loved it, just didn't work out for full time. So I do have a marketing and comms and PR background, but I think a lot of people are probably going to ask some of those similar questions. And I also watched the recording that you and Jenna did. And I think you touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to hear any experience, guidance, advice around being a working professional and as a person of color, especially in the outdoor community where it often does skew away from minorities.
Yeah. It's a tough one because I think there are so many companies that have different cultures than Patagonia. And I mean, my experience in the outdoor industry is with two companies almost now equal time, Patagonia and then REI in the retail side. So I will say though that looking for the companies that have that kind of stronger, especially global culture is helpful. Now, I can, again, only really speak from experience to the Patagonia side because, I mean, Yvonne's had friends in all parts of the world since the 50s, and we've hired folks from overseas since the 1970s when this company started. So it's always been part of the culture. and now I'll say this as a person again, not as the spokesperson for Patagonia. It's worth looking at any of the companies. Well, let me frame it like this: if I was looking, uh, it would be worth checking to see if there are any companies that stand out for either rolling back DEI policies or not saying anything and just continuing. I would give many companies the benefit of the doubt if they're not coming out and saying like we're staying on course and we're going to keep all of our commitments to DEI, whether the government does this or that, because it's a really fucking scary time to be a business right now, running afoul of some of the more vengeful parts of the government, we'll say. So I completely understand and empathize. But at the same time, there are companies out there that are like very visibly like rolling back those commitments. In the outdoor space, it would be helpful to see, in my opinion at least, looking at any companies that have offices overseas too, not just like production or stores overseas, but having corporate or like HQ style jobs overseas, because that builds in some of that multiculturalism too. Um, the other thing too is just looking at where they're showing up there. I mean, there are so many organizations in the outdoor recreation space at this point um, that really focus, like if you look at Teresa Baker's stuff, everything that she's involved in, and calling out outdoor retail leadership to start either putting out things that reflect how diverse the outdoor culture is. I mean, I grew up in Ohio, we'll say, and going outside for there, I was like the only Asian dude for like miles, But come to Southern California, and that's not the case. So it's like getting that sort of nice moment where it's like, holy shit, it's not the same everywhere. There are still brands out there that might not reflect that. And I would look at some of those third-party nonprofit organizations that are looking to diversify the outdoor industry and seeing what kind of companies are signing on, and then doing a little bit more research into that. I think, despite being a PR person for a company, I'm still super skeptical of almost anything that any company does, and healthily for our own sometimes, where we have to kind of stress test that stuff to see how dedicated Patagonia is or how dedicated REI is, North Face, Arc'teryx, all of them, just because you sign on to something, that doesn't necessarily mean anything unless you're starting to actually put resources, time, and weight behind it. But I think, yeah, looking at some of those organizations, especially ones in like there's one our Europe team helped start called Opening Up the Outdoors. And it's groups like that are very much more like grassroots, and it's not some like fucking chamber of commerce, like, look how diverse everybody, like, not if anybody's from the chamber here, I'm sorry, but like that kind of stuff just is super hollow. But if it's like grassroots and it's actually action oriented into increasing diversity within the industry, like I think that could be a great way to start, and then doing some investigation from there.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Gabriella.
Hello. Hi, I'm Gabriella. Thank you guys so much for hosting this powerful discourse on this topic and for your time here. I am a marketing professional in currently an industry I don't want to be in. I've been there for 2 years and I'm looking to get back into the outdoor industry. I had internships when I was in school in environmental nonprofits and in the fishing industry, which is my background, fishing and boating. And when I was listening to Jen earlier describe what you do, I'm like, that's a dream job. So I'm wondering, what is your kind of advice on, how you would get from somewhere like here to going entry level into the outdoors to getting where you are? And can you describe kind of the grind that you've been through and maybe some of the pros and some of the cons?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I've had such a singular, unique, and lucky experience to get to where I am, and I'll be very upfront about that. But I do think that there is an untold part to my story, and I'm sure a lot of folks in the industry story where it's like I mentioned this in the earlier talk with Jenna too, where like if you look at my resume and you look at the story where it goes like I go from one day being a manager at REI to in customer experience in Patagonia, and then the next line says that I'm in PR and communications. But exactly as you're saying, Gabriella, like there's a shit ton of stuff that happens between that. And the amount of time that I was looking at Patagonia as a company, thinking like, how the hell am I going to get out of Ohio to get to California? Like all of this stuff, like all of that took years, you know. So to be to be clear, it did take a while for me to get here too, but I still consider myself really, really fortunate. In order to get into the industry though, I mean, I was lucky enough to be in a position where I left being an editor at a newspaper to cashiering at REI just because I was thinking maybe I'd go back to school, and ended up cashiering, staying there for like 6 years, which is like I don't know how it happened. Um, but I like there was this kind of moment where I had to force myself into taking the job. And I mean, it's not something that everyone can do, you know. I want to be really transparent in that I was lucky that I could go from working as, I mean, I guess you can consider it white collar job into an entry level position. Um, Do I recommend that for everybody? Not necessarily, but for me, that was the best way to get into the outdoor industry because I just had zero experience otherwise, you know. For you, though, I do think that you might be able to look at your internships, your past experiences, and use connections like that you might still have or within those other companies to try and just figure out a way back in. The way that I've found the industry to be, at least, aside from like the very large kind of conglomerate outdoor companies, the smaller specialized outdoor companies, I mean, it's a pretty small group, and networking actually does help a ton, which is tough for me because, as we were saying, like introvert 1000%. But that would be my thought for you, either going back to the nonprofits or some of the internships with the fishing and boating industry to see. And I don't think it necessarily even has to be the companies for which you worked before. It could just be, you know, anybody within that in that realm. Or, you know, like I will use us for an example where if we were to see somebody who's in marketing now, and they did have a stint at, say, like North Face. Like we can make that connection for sure. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same company, but it's just finding the right opportunity to step back in, and that can be pretty tough for sure. Um, I'm sorry, what was your other question?
Thank you so much. Yeah, just kind of your entry level to where you are now. What was
Yeah.
that like?
Right. So this is where like the luck part came in. I lucked out in that there was a position that opened up on a temporary basis internally on the PR and communications side of the company. I had no idea that this kind of role existed. And the role I'm in right now, to be clear, is different from the one that I started in PR and comms. But it just so happened that I had that weird mix of experience where I was classically trained in journalism, worked in marketing, uh, became an editor, and then worked retail in the outdoor industry for 6 years. Where again, like if you're looking at that on paper, it's like, holy shit, this kind of matches what this position is looking for. Where otherwise, it means nothing, honestly. But um, that's the way it was for me. And like it sounds strange, but if I would have had this job specifically in mind as my end goal, punctuation mark on my resume, like this is the job that I want to retire in, I probably would have followed a really similar path where I have to learn the fundamentals of journalism, learn how to write, learn how to interview people, blah, 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 go into marketing to figure out how that aspect works of it, to apply the journalistic principles and practice to that. Um, and then get into the outdoor industry and kind of just shovel as much product information into my head and start getting used to the terms, used to the culture of the industry, roll it all into one, and then start applying for jobs like this. So, if that helps, God bless you. But it's yeah, like it was such a strange journey for me to get where I am. But I mean, at least it sounds as though you know kind of which orientation you have and the direction you want to go, and you have the experience to get there. Where it's just like the marketing portion is there, but it's just transferring it over into another industry.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's a great reminder to lean back on my networks as well. So I'll be sure to do that as I continue to look.
Yeah.
Always. Yeah. And just to kind of hop in there, it's the connection of the dots that's really important. So you're going to understand, like, so Jin had this education and then this experience in retail. He understood the customer and then he had this journalistic passion and all of this. When you see a job that you're like, that's my dream job, and you're like, I know that I can do that. All of these dots are being connected in your head, but you need to put that on your resume. So don't make their hiring manager do that. They won't understand. Don't make them, spend their brain power trying to be like, wait, why are they applying? Use that in your resume professional summary, that 1 to 2 sentences. Use that. Recruiters look at that first. That's your opportunity to connect the dots. And people want to enrich the position. So knowing like, oh, I have this internship experience, I have marketing experience that's beyond what you're asking for. And I know that I can do the job you're asking for because XYZ, that's who gets the job, the person that can solve the problem, plus a little bit of enrichment.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys.
Sure. Hey, Rachel.
Hey, Jenna, thanks so much. Hi, Jen. Thanks for joining us tonight. Yeah, I like everyone on this call. I feel like I'm a comms professional. I'm a director of communications and employee engagement at an employee benefits company. The past year, I took a stretch assignment with a dotted line into our Office of Strategic Initiatives, so future of work, return to office initiatives, just to kind of broaden the type of work I'm doing and kind of do something that was a stretch assignment and was a little more impactful to the strategic goals of the organization. But besides that, yeah, really passionate about the outdoors. I have a great group of core female friends. We're adventure enthusiasts. We go rock climbing, ice climbing, stand-up paddleboarding. Our last ice climbing trip was interesting. The high point was that I did my first multi-pitch climbing, which was cool, but two of the women work in the outside industry and they were going through layoffs on that trip. In fact, one
Oh,
woman,
God.
she had to get up at 4 a.m. to lay off staff in Europe one morning, marketing staff, sponsored athletes. So, we have a lot of conversations because they know I'm passionate about this, but they're like, it's so hard right now. So I guess my question for you is just given, the global economic situation and the economic headwinds in the industry right now, how are companies like Patagonia thinking about hiring for the next 1 to 2 years? Are we in a contraction phase or reset? And like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll at least speak to the experience I have seen and from what I've heard, not specifically as like a people and culture person of Patagonia, but at least for us, it was just making sure that we are, as a company, aligned with the priorities first to get through whatever the hell is happening out in the world. Our CEO is very clear where we have to focus that on and control the stuff that we can control. And for that, I mean, there definitely is an element to hiring with that, where, like I mentioned before, we're talking about product a lot. And it's investing in roles like that. Now, I can't say for sure what the entire industry is like, but I mean, just as somebody in the industry, not as like an insider at Patagonia, for instance, I have a lot of friends that are still at REI or within other parts of the industry. And I mean, it's getting affected in the same way as any other sector of business overall. I think it's possible that it might be more muddied just because of how like athleisure and how everything is kind of outdoors, but nothing is outdoors at the same time, you know? Um, maybe mine is like ice climbing stuff. uh, I think there's like a lot of identity finding and just really figuring out what our place in the world is while all of this other shit is happening. It's not, I mean, it's not a great answer because I honestly don't know, but from where I sit, at least, it's definitely like not in a nosedive per se, and people are still recreating outside, which is super important considering all the threats there are to outside. But um, yeah, I can't really speak to it for sure on our end. But at the same time, it's not like super doom and gloom for sure from where we are. Now, I think the one thing that could be tough for, I'm not sure what company your friend is with, but if we're talking about Europe too, I mean, there's none of us have been immune to this stuff. We talk to our global teams all the time, and they're facing the same kinds of problems that we are. And so it is a super unfortunate thing that happened that she had to do that and lay people off. But at the same time, I mean, I'm not ducking for cover or searching for another job myself. That might
Yeah,
be
no.
yeah, naive on my end, I guess.
No, I appreciate the candor. Yeah, I just, I feel like the conversations I had with them on that trip, they were like, maybe this isn't the best time to jump into this because I am in a relatively secure,
Yeah.
industry and space. And it is just making me think about, maybe I continue looking for more growth opportunities beyond my traditional comms background within my current organization just to build up my skill set.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is, I don't want to give you career advice because my career is, again, based on a very lucky roll on the roulette wheel. But I will say, just by like something I've observed, is that the outdoor recreation industry as a whole has, post COVID at least, gotten far more legitimacy, I guess we can say, like in terms of being able to throw its weight around. And so what I've seen is that outdoor recreation companies and outdoor, whatever we want to call them, whatever group, like they are hiring from outside of the industry, which is interesting, especially for some of the more skilled kind of higher is not the right word, but more skilled tenured positions where like that experience is important, but also the people who are in your position are looking to move into the industry. And it's not just people trying to get a pro deal, which like there are people who do that, right? Like that's a completely valid reason.
Oh, that's
Um,
why I was a ski instructor in my
right.
youth.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just something that I've noticed. I don't know if it's true all around, but just by reading news from around the industry, it does seem like, there are companies that are pulling from not just other outdoor industry brands. So if it is kind of scary or like you're able to read that and it still feels a little bit uncomfortable, it might not be a bad idea because there will be a place if you got the experience for sure.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hi, Bianca.
Hi, I'm a comms professional as well. I have a question about market and business impact. How do you measure the impact of PR and communications efforts in the terms of business growth or brand equity?
That's a good question. And the answer is probably going to be pretty unsatisfying. um, we decided a long time ago that we would disregard a lot of the kind of standard vanity metrics that come with some of the media measurement, we'll say, because I'm sure if anybody here does earned media or PR and comm stuff, like when you see the report and the the potential impressions is 16 billion on something.
Yeah.
Is this? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yes,
So,
it's
um,
insane.
yeah. So, I mean, we don't really necessarily have a scientific way of looking at things, but we do go after some of the larger stories. And I think the bigger measurement of success is whether or not the story gets published, people care about it versus any of the other kind of potentials and hypotheticals that come with it. So I'll take the story about Cochimo Valley in Chile, for instance.
Yeah.
And there was an exclusive that got run in The Guardian with the reporter. If y'all haven't read it, it's an incredible story. It's an even more incredible place. I haven't never been, but from the pictures,
Chile. I
it
love.
looks amazing. But for us, like the success of that story is number one, getting it written by somebody who knows the place intimately and deeply and cares and understands the significance of what it is enough to be able to tell the story with nuance and detail that somebody who's just like, oh, Patagonia helped some Chileans save a place. We'll put it in briefs in A15 or something in a newspaper, you know? So that part of it was a success for us.
Yeah.
What we're seeing, though, is, or not seeing, what we're also trying to do is be able to spread that kind of news to our community. So interestingly, at Patagonia, our media team is external earned media and social media. We're one team, one dream, where we have the same kind of objectives to be able to tell the stories to our community, either via through earned media, but also through social media, because that's where a lot of our community is.
Yeah.
So, like we do, of course, look at engagements, impressions when it comes to social media stuff, but it is more looking at like how is this story being spread and is it actually breaking through? Because I think I may have used this example in the previous talk, but like having a story on A1 of the New York Times is still really important. It's still super freaking cool.
Yes.
But if you're online, the homepage of the New York Times changes like 8 times in a single day.
Yeah.
So you, like, as a PR person, as a comms person, we can just be like, hell yeah, you know, we got that shit. We did it and it's great. But the truth is, if you come to the New York Times page 1 minute too late and it's not on the homepage, by and large, I would say a lot of people aren't going to see it. And so we look at social media, we look at the conversations it makes, how we're able to spread it. And I mean, we'll even go so far as to use some of those stories in pitches, like product pitches for our product team. They'll send it and say like, hey, here's spring 26. But by the way, did you know that we were involved in X, Y, or Z? So in reality, it is like success to us is, I think the quote is like the acres saved, number one. The amount of stuff that we stop from being developed unnecessarily, but it's also like being able to tell the story in general and then spreading it to our community as much as possible. So there's no real hard metric that we can use or live and die by when it comes to earned media. But we definitely get a sense of if something can break through like the zeitgeist. And I got all of this really great information from the social side of our team, where they opened my eyes to this to the idea that there's really isn't one of those monoculture moments anymore, where every single person in America has seen this one episode about seatbelts on this sitcom. Like that shit doesn't happen anymore. And so we have to try to figure out how to break through. And if we can create moments like that, we know it intrinsically, and we would consider that a success.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we have about 7, 8 minutes left for questions. So I just wanted to do a little time check there. Also, Jen, this is probably a yes or no. Are there remote roles at Patagonia right now, or is relocating to Ventura pretty necessary?
It depends on the team. There are remote roles for sure.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I thought it was all Ventura. So
yeah, if
cool.
A lot of them will involve like sales rep and the kind of the classic traveling roles.
Yeah.
For the most part, though, HQ, you're in Ventura or traveling to Ventura.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Jasmine.
Thanks, Jenna. Hi, Jen. I'm Jasmine. I'm also in Southern California. I do communications and philanthropy. Can you speak a little bit more on AI, how much of it you're using it? You talked a bit about writing a lot at the beginning, and then also from a company perspective.
Yeah. I think the easiest way to frame it as a company is we're still trying to figure it out. We are of the understanding that it has gotten to the point where adoption of it would leave us behind. Now, the question is, is it possible to be able to use it and stay within our guidelines of being a responsible company? And that's what we're trying to figure out right now. So to Jenna's point, she mentioned that we had a recent hire about AI, and some of that, a large majority, I don't want to speak for him, of course, but is trying to frame up what does AI even look like at Patagonia, where it's like we're a famous very low tech Luddite company. Our founder doesn't even have a cell phone. He's got like a rotary phone on his desk, doesn't have a computer. But at the same time, recognizing for certain elements, it can certainly help. Like it is possible that AI will play a role in causing cancer. And do we want to just shut all of that? Not to say that we would do it, of course, but like, do we want to shut out the technology that could possibly do that? So it is wrestling with that for sure. I'd like to think that sometime, like after Al Gore invented the internet, like we had to say, that's a joke, by the way, that like we had the same kind of conversations internally, maybe, you know, where it's like this brand new thing. It's how are we going to deal with it? I'm sure there was conversations on both sides, and it's just another one of those moments where we have to figure out energy usage. We're getting our arms around like what it would look like. And these are very serious conversations that are happening here too, which is why we're not like hosting Sam Altman like for dinner or anything like that, because like we just have to find out first, you know. From a personal standpoint, the only thing I've used it was experimenting on transcripts for meetings. Otherwise, I'm kind of out of it personally. I think it would be a partial lie to say that I'm not afraid of it as a writer. But also at the same time, I mean, so much of my work is very singular with a very concrete routing system where I write something, it goes to X person, Y person, and Z person, you know. So there really isn't a whole lot of ambiguity in terms of my day-to-day stuff. It's just the ambiguity comes from what I'm writing, not necessarily what I'm doing. But yeah, I know, I mean, I'm sure that there are probably people here that use it for scheduling. Some folks who have like the fucking 3 times booked for every single hour of the day, I'm sure they can use it well. But for me, yeah, it just really hasn't entered my workflow or honestly my life, to tell you the truth. And it isn't, again, necessarily that like I'm so anti-AI on like a visceral level, but it just isn't something that I found necessarily super helpful. If it can like wash dishes someday, then maybe you'll see me singing the praises of like Claude or something. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lauren.
Hi. So I was a biologist for many years, and I worked with a lot of teams, mostly on endangered fish, kind of across the US. Um, and I'm really curious because it's something that was very close to us with messaging, specifically around brands, where as the environment and the current administration and all of those, emotions are so heightened and largely in a negative sense towards the biology fields, how are you navigating the intersection between being realistic and honest about what needs to change without, frankly, bumming people out and turning them off from just following you on social media altogether or even, interacting?
That's a really good question. And I take what you say at a very like macro level, not even necessarily. Yeah, I mean it's everything, right? Whether it's rivers protecting fish, etc., because it's bleak, you know. Yeah, that's my. No, I'm just kidding. It's like we have to. I think we just our role a lot of the times is elevating the work that our partners do is the thing. So like a lot of folks see Patagonia as this very environmental activist company, but we are, But a lot of the effect that we've been able to have and a lot of the changes that we're able to bring about comes from the grassroots groups that are out there doing the work every single day, which I'm sure they're the folks that you interacted with, and probably still do at this point. But for us, I mean, that passion, that sort of that will, the fight, that is what keeps us going. And I just had this conversation, maybe it was the other day, or maybe it was today, I don't remember, but it was exactly that, where the question was like, when we're messaging and we're talking and we're communicating about a certain issue, it is so easy to be able to point the finger and say, like, look what the fuck this person's doing. They're making everything worse. But the point is, our community, for the most part, I would say, knows, what the game is and how certain things came about. But what's actually important during these times is the issue, is the effects, and what's at stake. We can say, I don't want to name names here, but it's like a certain person in the United States might be causing this policy to happen. And this is why we don't like it, etc. But the important thing for us, at least, is changing it, And so what ends up happening is the messaging sharpens up and we start talking about how this specific issue is happening and what you can do about it. Because if you start going down that rabbit hole and you start getting darker and darker in there, it's like you said, it gets super overwhelming, because you turn on the TV or you scroll, you read the news, and you see all of the effects that people are having on all of this stuff, all of the policies, all of the bad shit that's happening in the world. But for action to happen, we focus on the issues. We focus on what's happening, what's at stake, and what people can do about it. Because, we're never going to be able to silence people's Twitter or X accounts or fucking Truth Social accounts or whatever it is. But we can take action on certain policies, on certain actions. We can speak up, we can protest, we can help people draft petitions, sign make, and all of that. And for me, at least personally, as a comms person, that, I made the joke before where I feel more in tune with the news in this position than I ever did as a journalist, which is super crazy. But that's the one thing that kind of keeps me going, because you hit that event horizon in the news and it is just it's kind of like you're done, and there's no shame in it. There's nothing wrong with it. But I think in order to continue an action-oriented comm style, it's about the issues and it's about what people can do about it. So if we, take your example with wild fish, for instance, I mean, it's an issue that we take very seriously. And so the question is, it's about dams, deadbeat dams. It's about getting rivers restored. It's about open net fish farms getting taken out of fjords, taken out of coasts, and that's the issue. We can get into the politics, we can get into all the companies, and we have the receipts. It's public information to know who's doing this, why, and what. But the issue is, it's the pens and it's the deadbeat dams and it's freeing the rivers.
That's a beautiful comms lesson, to stick to the facts, actually. Very, very strong.
Yeah.
Andrew.
Hey, thanks, Jenna, and thank you, Jen, for your time. This has been super, just informative and enlightening. I'm the Southern California regional manager for a small organic food startup brand. I'm actually just up the road from you here in Santa Barbara.
Nice.
And I'm not in comms, so I don't exactly have a smart question to ask. And this feels silly following up that answer you just gave, but I just wanted to ask, what's your favorite, selfish perk about working at Patagonia?
Oh man, I'll give you the real answer. Um, it's honestly just being able to fuck off and go run. I remember when we did, I was in Ventura when YC and the rest of the board announced the ownership change of the company. And me being the person I am, afterward, there was, a big celebration. And it was the Earth is our only shareholder moment, September 14th, 2022. It was a beautiful day in Ventura, surrounded by all of the coworkers that I love. But the one thing I wanted to do after that announcement was made was just like get rid of all of that frenetic energy on a run. And after the announcement and everybody was getting ready to do stuff, hang out, talk, etc., somebody asked me like, "Hey, do you want to go grab a beer or something like that?" I said, I just want to go run. And they said, "That's awesome. And I'll see you when you get back." And like me being able to do that and me being able to explain that I need to do that to my coworkers who understand that, like it's more than just a run to me. It's like being able to be myself, being able to get away from certain things, and being able to not be apologetic about that to anybody is huge for me. And this is probably TMI, but y'all spending an hour with me, but like it's helped me so much mentally to actually be able to be in the position I'm in. Because man, I was struggling for the longest time where, there are moments when I'm sure all of us have had this when you're looking at the mirror at 2 a.m, you got to wake up in 7 hours. Like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? But it doesn't necessarily have to be Patagonia for everybody. But I am fortunate enough to be in a position where like that stuff is gone now, to be able to be around the smartest, sharpest, most passionate and caring people in the world who understand why I need to run. Like that's the perk for me for sure. And vegan
Thank you
food
so
in the
much.
cafe.
Thank you so much for answering my question. I appreciate your time, Jen.
Yasmina.
Of course.
Hi, I'm actually a student, so listening to all of your guys' questions has been really insightful. I'm a marketing student. I guess my biggest question, and I think it's a great one following Andrew's, is with your current role, is there another role or position either in Patagonia or with another company that you would even consider leaving your current role for? And what would that reason be, or why are you happy where you are and see yourself staying here for a long time? But with everyone kind of asking about career changes, would you look at another one in the future, or are you quite happy with where you are?
The only role that I would leave for is Vincent Stanley's job of director of philosophy. He is he is more than a mentor to me. He is kind of just like this sage, legendary writer figure. But yeah, to answer your question, I mean, I am not going to be leaving here even if they fire me. They'll have to bring security. But like the reality is too, like this role specifically was one that I kind of came into just by bothering managers enough to start giving me more and more assignments. There is a lesson in there, in terms of like, hey, do we need to write something about this, or are there any opportunities to maybe write a thought piece about business responsibility or something like that? And doing that enough eventually turned into the role that I am currently in. Granted, our chief communications and impact officer, Carly Kenna, did all of this stuff before and did it really well, but it was just like, I think I bothered her enough that it got created, and it was one that I'm just hoping that I can ride for the next 27 years. We'll see, though.
Love that. All right, Ella, close us out.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hey, thanks everyone. I'll keep this short. I'm a founder in the outdoor space, so as a result, I'm also marketing, contracts,
Everything.
everything. Yeah. And it's not my day job, but it's a passion of mine. So, I'm really just curious. Some tension that I'm struggling with is how do you maintain authenticity in storytelling and like brand identity? And it's probably really specific with Patagonia. But how do you do that while still balancing like this is a job and I am selling a product at times? Again, Patagonia is a unique case, but just thoughts there.
Yeah. there are two parts to the answer. One of which I will defer to Yvonne and his chapter and let my people go surfing about marketing. And it was simply just talking about you have to tell the people you like your marketing is just storytelling for what you've done. And if you're not doing anything interesting, there's not really a whole story to tell, which is where I think a lot of folks, especially people in the younger generation, which is weird for me to say that because I still feel young, but I'm getting increasingly older. But they've just been marketed to their entire lives. You know, every single thing they see, whether it's social media, YouTube videos, all of that, like built-in Truman Show-esque kind of marketing is everywhere, and that's what they know as communications. So for us, at least, like in order to combat that, authenticity comes from telling stories, but not telling everything, because not everything is a story. And it's interesting because we have those kind of tentpole moments where I think about like 1996, the switch to organic cotton. There's the 2022 ownership change. 2017, there was the lawsuit against Trump 1.0 for Bears ears. There was a shitload of stuff that happened in between those moments, but in terms of like what breaks through and what people kind of know us for, it really is those larger moments. And so in my view, at least, like unless, and this is not speaking to your brand at all, but just in general, like unless the company is willing to do something to stand out and not as like a fucking stunt or anything like that, but do something interesting and singular, then it's going to be nearly impossible to kind of break through, you know, because almost every other company out there is saying that their stuff is sustainable or green, where, you know, there's no real metric for that. There are third-party certifications for like regenerative organic certified, but for the most part, I think people have kind of caught on to some of the using novelty and responsibility as marketing and storytelling that we've done. But again, like that formula is still there, and being able to tell real stories and being able to use real examples of what the company is doing as marketing. The second part of that, I highly recommend, and this is going to get a little philosophical and meta possibly, but if you go onto our site, there is a story called Capture a Patagoniac, and it's written by the late Jennifer Ridgway, who just basically documented the process of how we got to the photography style that we use. And that to me is a huge metaphor in marketing and the way that we approach just outdoor industry in general, comms, photography, marketing, anything you want to call it. The lesson I think is in there where it's, to paraphrase, it's real people doing real things in real environments. And like all of that kind of studio shot stuff, that's fine, you know, if that's the company, what they want to do. But like if you look at a lot of the photography on our site, people aren't wearing current season stuff. They're probably in places that take 8 hours, in some cases, multiple modes of transit to get, and places where also like Red Bull's not there. Not to throw Red Bull under the bus here, but you know, the value is in kind of the solitary, the far flung, and the place being kind of exotic in a way, you know. I don't know how necessarily that translates into your company, but from our perspective, like people know Patagonia for transparency and authenticity, and it's not because we told them that we are. It's just by the nature of that storytelling, the marketing, the communications. The one last thing, since you do have a comms hat in your your drawer of like 50 of them, I'm sure. The one thing that we always come back to in communications that Vincent has always been very soft but never yielding on is that whenever we talk to people about anything, whether it's something great that we may have done with a partner or something that we may have messed up, or just even educating our community about like a really obscure issue, it's never meant to be, we'll say, and never written to be condescending or any of that shit. It's meant to be written and read as if it was written by somebody who was a friend and equal. I'd like to think at least that even though we have some monster ambassadors, and I think of, people like Caroline Gleich, if you go watch this new video we put out with Claire Gallagher about running ultras and being pregnant, like that stuff. We have those kinds of superhuman people out there, but it really does come down to like approachability, the realness, and the authenticity behind them too. And it's like a direct reflection of that philosophy. And so like, yes, we have some of the most pinnacle outdoor apparel out there where like Colin Haley or Josh Wharton is doing some crazy shit on a wall that none of us could ever even imagine. And like, but at the same time, they as people make it approachable. They make the act of climbing and the sport approachable and real. And it's not meant to be like super glossy. There are a lot of things I'm not going to say here, but and like celebrity and unattainable, I think we'd like to think of ourselves as like a people's brand. And yes, you can go climb some crazy mixed climb in the ice and far-flung places in the world, but also like it's just made for people that are getting out and pushing the edge of what they can do.
That's awesome. No, I'm focused on combining yoga and backpacking, but teaching people how to backpack along the way. So
Sick.
super aligned with making it approachable. It's working with most folks who it's their first time backpacking.
Yeah.
And then self-healing tools in the wilderness with yoga. So that took a lot of notes. Glad this is recorded. That was awesome. Thank you.
Yes, I
You're
will
welcome.
send out the recording to everyone after this call. Jen, thank you so much for your energy and your passion and all of your help today. And thank you for everyone for really good questions that will make, that makes the meeting. If Patagonia is your dream job, I also do have a recruiter from Patagonia coming to our event in Portland that you can speak to live. That's April 16th. Basecampoutdoorevents.com is where you can get information about all of our events in person and digital. Otherwise, I will see you online.
Yeah. You have Michael, right? Chamberlain
We have
Torres?
Michael, yeah, and he is fabulous.
If you all, I'll put this plug in here. Wow, that was a weird thing to say. I'll put this plug in for him. He is insane. Like he is just, man,
Yeah.
he is a good person. If you can make it to Portland and meet him, he's great. Yeah.
I agree completely. Yeah.
Everybody's laughing at the God
yeah,
damn it.
that was what a way to close it out, Jen. That was just on brand through and through. Thank you everyone for coming. You can find Jen on LinkedIn and be well.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. It's good talking to you.
Thank you.